Hi, I am Simon Walland, and I am doing an introduction to an event which I'm holding on the 1st of September, Tuesday evening, 7 p.m. And I will be talking about managing your divorce and your financial separation as cheaply as you possibly can. Now, when I say as cheaply as you possibly can, it may well be, depending on your circumstances, you can do the whole thing for zero cost. So this is exactly how it is. There is a court fee. Usually you would pay a solicitor. If you pay a solicitor, you are going to spend a fortune. If you are on benefits, you can avoid the court fee. You do not need a solicitor because nothing in this is difficult. At points you need to have your wits about you, and at points you may need some guidance. And I will talk about how that can work for you on this event. It's an hour and a half. There's a question and answer session afterwards, but I will cover everything that you need to explain how you can do this for very little or no cost. And when I'm saying very little, we're talking hundreds rather than thousands. So let me just go into a bit of an introduction about this event. So who am I? My name is Simon Walland. I am a qualified barrister. I have worked in family law for 25 years and I help people. I'm not a practicing barrister. I do not go to court with people as a barrister. I do go to court with people as a Mackenzie friend. I help people as a Mackenzie friend. I spend 90% of my time helping people with paperwork and advice and dealing with things behind the scenes. So if you need guidance in anything to do with family law, I can help you with that. And I tend to help people who cannot afford to get a solicitor and a barrister. So much of this you can do on your own. And I always take the view, what is the point of paying somebody to do something you can do yourself? There is no big mystery or big skill about family law. Most of it is common sense. There is obviously law around it, but when you know the procedure and you know how that works, then you can go through it. So rather than spoil what I'm going to cover on the course, what I'm going to go through today in this little introduction is busting some of those myths. People say, well, I can't do this, this happened and that's happened. I'm going to bust all of those so that you can see how possible this all is. So first of all, people will say that divorce automatically divides the property. It doesn't. And when we're saying property here, it isn't only the house, you're looking at all of your assets. The divorce terminates your marriage. That's it. It does nothing more than that. The court process is slightly confusing in that when you apply for the divorce, you tick the box to say that you're going to apply for financial remedy or going to go through the financial process. It doesn't mean anything because until you make that application, nothing's going to happen. So you can apply for your divorce, you could tick all those boxes, you get your divorce, your marriage is terminated, it stops there. You have to make another application to deal with your finances. My ex will not agree with the divorce. Doesn't matter. Now, since 2022, we have had no fault divorce and you cannot easily stop a divorce. In 25 years, I have only ever had to attend 2 hearings for divorces. It's a paperwork exercise that goes through. And you do not go to court. You do not generally have issues. There are certain issues that will crop up, and I'll mention those, but I can help you with each of those. And if you come across a difficult situation, I can help you with that, and I can help get you through that. So if your ex doesn't agree with the divorce, it doesn't matter. The court will take a view. You want a divorce. You cannot make a marriage work if you don't want to be in that marriage. Therefore, you should get a divorce. That's the approach that's taken. I can't prove my ex's infidelity. I can't prove that they've had this bad behavior. I can't prove this. None of that applies anymore. Since 2022, it's no fault. You can apply for divorce on one basis, and there is one reason that you need, and that is that your marriage has irretrievably broken down. If you think it has irretrievably broken down, you will get a divorce. If you think it's broken down, possibly you could repair it, but you don't want to go to that bother. In your head, you can say it is irretrievably broken down. You will then get a divorce. You do not need reasons. You don't need excuses. No one is going to question why you're getting that divorce. You can just apply for it. We married abroad. I deal with lots of divorces. I'm doing one at the moment. They married in Syria. I very often deal with Polish divorces, all sorts of countries. It doesn't matter. If you live in England, and the court has a term called domicile, where you believe you belong, where you believe that you live, your home, your natural home that you would return to. If that is in England and Wales, you can get a divorce in England and Wales. I recently did one for a couple who live in Switzerland. They're both living in Switzerland, but they're English. They own property in England, and that is another reason why it should happen in England. A court in one country cannot dictate what happens to property in another country. So they're living in Switzerland, but they have a house in England. So you get divorced in England. We can't afford to divorce. The whole point of this introduction and the event is you can't afford it. Therefore, I can help you to get through it when you can't afford it. The most you may have to pay for the divorce is the court fee, which is about £600. The rest of it is at no cost. I don't know where my ex is. Now, that is a sticking point. That is something that I can help you with, and there are ways that you can overcome that. But it's a bit of a messy pickle that you're going to have to deal with. I can help you to deal with that. If I try to explain all the different methods of dealing with I don't know where my ex is, we'd be here all night. So that's not what this is about. This is one of the things where you may need a little bit of help, but you can overcome it. Even if you never ever find out where they are, you can still get the divorce anyway. We don't need a divorce. Now, maybe you don't need a divorce. The divorce terminates the marriage. That's all it does. If you are going to remarry, you need a divorce. You cannot be married to two people at the same time because that is bigamy. So therefore, if you're going to remarry, you need a divorce. Now, I had a situation not that long ago in a financial hearing where the couple had separated. They had a small business. They had a house with 100% mortgage, and they separated 20 years ago. Now, that business which he ran is worth £1.5 million. She decided she was going to divorce him. The house was still mortgaged to the hilt because it was an interest-only mortgage, so that never reduced. She divorced him. She may well have been entitled to half of his business. In the end, there were some complications, and she got a couple of £100,000. But had they divorced 20 years ago, she wouldn't have got anything. And he wouldn't have had to pay anything. He would have kept his business and he would have been okay. But it was, for him, he's approaching retirement. It was a nightmare for him. He was panicking. He was upset about it, as people would be. And he really didn't want to go through this. And he kept saying, "I'll just give her this, just give her that." And I had to keep saying to him, "Now, hold on. Let's see where this goes, see where the next bit goes." And in the end, it worked out for him. But you don't need a divorce unless you're going to remarry, but it's not a bad idea to separate from somebody that you're no longer with. It does happen. I've had several clients where things have come back later on and bitten them in the backside because they didn't deal with it before. And the court will say, you should have dealt with it before. But I am dealing with your divorce as of today. Where are you today? What's your position today? So there's a reason why you should get a divorce. We then move on. So I've got a little clicker, and my clicker doesn't always work. Right, my ex is in prison. Doesn't matter. You can still locate them. You can still divorce them. My ex said they will make my life hell if I divorce them. If you ever needed a better reason to divorce, that's your reason. If that is what they say, and people say all sorts of things in the heat of the moment. I've seen all sorts of things. You'll never see the children again. I'll make you bankrupt, to do all of these things. People say things, they don't necessarily do them. But if you go through the process and they do start to make your life hell, then you can go to the police. There is a harassment law. And if they do something twice that a normal person would believe is unpleasant or unwarranted or shouldn't be happening, that is harassment. They will then be charged by the police for harassment. They can potentially go to prison for it. They can get fined. They are going to have all sorts of problems if they try to cause you the hell that they say they're going to cause you. However, I would say generally this is something that people say, not necessarily something that people do. My ex has said they would divorce me first. Where's your problem? You don't need to do anything. Let them do it. It doesn't matter who divorces who. You don't gain an advantage. The only advantage you would have is following that process through, that you have a little bit of control over the timing of it. But other than that, you don't get an advantage. What you can do now, which has happened when the law changed in 2022, is to do a joint divorce where both of you make the application together, you both pay half, you both have control over the whole thing. I'm opposed to divorce. Now, I get that. I can understand there are people who have customs and religions and all sorts of things, reasons why they don't want a divorce. And it is possible to get a judicial separation. It's exactly the same as a divorce, but it doesn't deal with the finances. It will still terminate your marriage. So, and I will talk about that on the main event. You don't need a divorce. You can have a judicial separation. It came in, as I understood it, I may be wrong, the Pope introduced it because of people not being able to get divorced. And I can't do paperwork. I can do paperwork. I can help you do paper. I get that. Some people don't like computers. Some people don't like dealing with things. That's fine. I can help you. As I say, it would be in the hundreds rather than in the thousands. So there are some myths about divorce. I'm now going to go through some myths about the finances, because people say, oh, if I get divorced, I've got to deal with the finances and I'm going to get hammered because of the way my ex is behaving, or potentially will behave. So we go through those similar things again. So my ex has given up work to stop me getting anything. Now I have an example, and this was a hearing that I did quite a long time ago now, where I was assisting the father in the financial case. The mother was a teacher. The mother had given up work. She'd given up work to have their little daughter, or have their daughter. Their daughter was now about 10 or 12. And she had not gone back to work. And we were in the hearing with the judge, and the judge said to her, why are you not working? And she said, because I hated it. I was a teacher. I hate children. I hated the whole thing. I couldn't do it, and I really hated it. Now, the judge has to look at your income. Now, the father had an income of about 50,000 a year. She had zero. And therefore, how is she going to manage with life if she's got no income? Now, the judge said to her, you are a qualified teacher. Lots of people in this world hate their jobs, but they have responsibilities. You have a responsibility towards your daughter. You have a responsibility to stand on your own 2 feet and live your life independently. So therefore, I will assess you earning £40,000 a year, which was the average price of a teacher. It's an argument I have used very often, because you quite often have somebody who isn't working say that they can't work, but they're qualified to do something and therefore they could. And the court will always take that into account, because the chances are the day after the hearing, when, oh, I'm pleading poverty and I can't work, the next day they go out and get a job, and they've gained all this money from the court and they go out and get the job. So that is not something that the court are going to consider, that you've given up work. If you've given up work for a good reason, then you've given up work for a good reason. That's a completely different issue. But if it's done to stop you from getting anywhere, then the court will overrule that. My ex has sold his car to a friend for £20. The court are not stupid. You are dealing with judges when you go into court. They really are not stupid. A judge is going to say, okay, you had a Mercedes, whatever it was. If I was arguing against that, I would say, well, this was the registration number. We buy any car, we'll buy that car for £15,000. There's a quote for it. Here's a value of it. You can get it anywhere online. You can get values of cars. The court would take £15,000, not the 20, because it is so obvious that they're going to get their car back next week for 20 quid. The court, and as I say, the court are not stupid. The court see people all the time trying to hide things. Everything is always split 50-50. No, it's not. The court look at 50-50. In a really simple case, if you had a young couple, they got a house with £100,000 in it, they're both working, they have no children, you're going to split the equity from that house 50-50. That's quite a simple case. But when you've got children, it never happens. I rarely see a case that is settled at 50-50 unless there are no children. When you have children, it tends to go in favour of the person who has the children living with them. If you both have the children living with you, there are other factors that come into play, and it possibly will go to 50-50. It may not go to 50-50. I would certainly say the majority of cases I've dealt with have been not 50-50. If an asset is in one person's name, they keep it. No, they don't. If you are married, the court will look at that as a partnership. You have both combined to generate money, generate the house, pay for the house, pay for a yacht, pay for investments, savings, all of that. It's deemed to be both of you. And therefore the court would start off, can we do 50-50? Is that fair and reasonable if we do 50-50? So it doesn't matter if the asset is in one person's name, although there's a slight twist to that, which I'll come on to in a moment. The person who earned the money gets more. No, they don't. On that same principle, it's a joint partnership, then it doesn't matter at all. If you have been, and not being sexist about this, but if you're the stay-at-home mum, the fact that you are there looking after the children allows your partner or your husband or wife to go out and work. If you weren't looking after the children and doing your part, they couldn't do their part. So therefore, it's a joint enterprise that you're both doing together. Homemakers don't contribute, so get nothing. Exactly the same principle. Rubbish. That does not happen at all. As long as you've been married for 5 years, if you've married for less than that, there's a different process, different things happen, which I can help you with. But typically, a homemaker that hasn't contributed a penny towards the matrimonial pot will still get their fair share of that. Could be half, although I spent ages telling you it won't be 50-50, but you're still entitled to at least half, more or less. Let's not say half or 50-50, but you get the point. Pre-matrimonial and post-matrimonial isn't included. So if I had a business, then we got married, we're living in that marriage, everything's all hunky-dory, we then separate, and then I inherit some money. I would argue that my inheritance is nothing to do with you because it came after the marriage. I would argue that my business is nothing to do with you because it came before the marriage. You had no part to play in that. But there are ways that that business can be included because you've brought that into the business. So you've brought that into the marriage. The marriage has benefited from that. Equally, the inheritance that's come afterwards, that can be brought into play depending on need. Now, the court are looking at separating both of you, and you both stand on your own 2 feet. In an ideal world, you both have a house, you move on with life again. But how can you do that when you've got 2 incomes, possibly 2 incomes and a house and everything else, and you've got to divide that in 2? It's not easy to do. where can we get other money from, because one of you who has the children living with them needs a house because the children need a house. So you can see children make a big difference to all of this. But you cannot necessarily say pre-matrimonial and post-matrimonial are completely excluded from this process, because they're not. They can come into play. You must go to court to settle finances. No, you don't. You can go to court. That's absolutely fine. You can do something which is called a consent order. So if you agree on how you're going to settle things, a consent order can be written up. That's something that I can do for you. That can be sent to the court, and you then have basically a court order. You don't even need that. You can reach an agreement. The problem with reaching an agreement is, what was the agreement? Was the agreement fair? Was it something that is enforceable? Probably not, unless it's a court order. So if you go to court, you will get a court order. If you do a consent order, you will get a court order. Both of those are legally enforceable. So if somebody has to pay you £10,000 on the 31st of December this year, if they don't pay it, you can take them to court, because the court order says they have to pay it. If you just have a written agreement between you, you can take that to court, but it hasn't got the same weight as a court order will have. And whatever you have agreed may not be fair anyway. When you do a consent order, it gets written out, sent to the court, and the court will look at whether it is fair or not. Is it similar to how the court would deal with it? The court fee for a consent order is £50. The court fee for a financial order is closer to £300. So there's a difference. But going to court is a nightmare. It is stressful, it's emotional, and you end up fighting each other. And that is not good in the long run for a relationship, particularly when you've got children. The whole thing is a nightmare. If you can avoid court, avoid court. You have to be divorced before dividing assets. No, you don't. If you got to your end of your marriage now, and you had this house with £100,000 in it, and you say, well, you have 50,000, I'll have 50,000, and off we go our own sweet way. You can do that. No one's going to be bothered about that. If in 5 years' time you go to court and nothing's changed, the court would say, well, it's what you did at the time, it was fair, that's okay. If you separated and your ex said, I'll give you £5,000, I'm going to keep 95, and you said, oh, okay, I feel intimidated, I feel bullied, I'll agree to that. You then go off. 5 years later, you can go back to court. The court would say, well, that wasn't fair. We need to change that. So you can separate your assets before you're divorced, but you have that risk that one of you, or one or the other of you, may take it back to court, and the court may change what you've come up with. Pensions can't be divided. Yes, they can. They are divided if they need to be divided. What you may have is this situation with a house of 100,000 and a pension of 100,000. If one of you has the house and the other one has the pension, you've both ended up with the same. You've both got £100,000, which is a bit unfair because your pension isn't worth £100,000. You can't spend it, and having a house is probably better than having a pension. But it's sometimes how the court will do it. If you had the £100,000 house and £1 million pension, then that pension will be shared to make it a bit more equal. Not necessarily 50-50, and I'm not going back into that conversation again, but it can be shared, and they are shared a lot. A verbal agreement is enough. Now, in contract law, a verbal agreement is as good an agreement as anything else. A verbal agreement has as much weight as any other kind of agreement, but there's the big but on this one. What was actually agreed? You have two different versions of what was agreed. No, I didn't agree to that. Yes, you did. So a verbal agreement is fine in itself, but when you get to an argument, it's no good at all. It really should be written down. Even if it's just an email exchange. I'll give you this, no, you give me that. Okay, we've agreed. That at least says something in writing that you can show to a judge later on. Otherwise, the judge has to try and work out, what did you both agree? You both say something, but I'm not sure, so I'm going to have to make a decision on that. And a judge will always say to you, try and deal with it yourself, try and come to an agreement yourself, because if you don't, I will make a decision, and I may make a decision that neither of you like. Now, I've heard that so many times from judges, but it's true. A judge has to make a decision. They can't just say, well, I don't know, let's just leave it. They have to deal with it. Once we're separated, we're protected from future financial claims. Now, going back to that situation with the guy with the business, now worth £1.5 million. If he had divorced at the time, if he had dealt with the finances at the time, then she could not come back. He is protected from any future claim because there's a court order. That court order will always say in there that you can't come back, you can't go after any of their estate if they die, all of those sorts of things. You are completely protected. So they are the myths that a lot of people see, a lot of people think are true. I've explained those now. So you've covered the myths on divorce and the myths on finances. Now, the event that I have is an online event, managing your divorce and financial separation at little to no cost. You can do it for zero cost, particularly if you're on benefits, you don't even pay the court fee. On a low income, you don't pay the court fee. The cost of the event is £30. If you go to a solicitor, you are going to be paying at least £250 an hour. For a financial case, you are probably looking to deal with the 2 hearings that you would have, probably £10,000 to £15,000. The first hearing, probably £4,000 or £5,000. You can do it for the court fee of £300. If you're on benefits or a low income, you don't even pay that for court fee. So you can do it. There is nothing in there that is impossible. I have coaching courses. I can coach you through it. I can guide you through it. I can help you through it. I can check your paperwork, all sorts of things which I'll talk about in the event, but you do not need to spend any more than £30, which is well worth the money for the information you're going to get. Tuesday, the 1st of September, 2026. It is going to be recorded. The recording will be available. It will still be £30. It's 7 p.m. until 8 p.m, so 8:30, hour and a half. And I will do a question and answer session afterwards. I don't want to get into detail about particular cases, but general questions about divorce and finances, then I will go through those. Click on the link if you're looking at this on YouTube. Click on the link below and you'll go through to the booking page. And there will be another event next month, probably on children cases, one the month after, and I will be doing one every month to cover different situations in family law. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope that has helped you, and I hope to see you on the 1st of September. Thank you very much.